Hi, I'm Lorena, and this is my friend Melony.
Hi.
She's going to show me how to do the borders right. You know, I do them wrong. Let me tell you how I do my borders. I just cut the fabric, put it together, and just sew all the way down, and apparently that's wrong. But I know I'm not the only one in the community of bad border, wavy border makers. So I wanted to share with you the wisdom of Melony. So one of the things Melony said to me, so she made a little paper for me. Thank God I have a paper. Okay. So one of the things we have to do is, you need to sew enough borderage fabric. She says sew enough border pieces together to go around the quilt. This is mitered border. You waste a lot of fabric doing this. She said she didn't have to do it this way, but the pros supposedly do it this way, so I'm trying to be a pro.
I never do it that way. So,
usually I used to just cut it and sew it. Yeah, exactly like that. Get your two ends. Sew it together. And then it straightens like that. That's how she does her borders. But you can also I did a tutorial on how to do the mitered if you have a problem. Because I used to have a lot of problems making these. These take a lot more time. And so yeah, she says just get your two pieces of fabric right. Have them kissing, and then put it together, and then you don't waste as much fabric. You make your borders that way. We quilters, we quilters won't judge you.
No quilt, please.
So you can do it either way. I used to do it this way, and then someone told me I was doing it wrong. That's why I do it mitered, but it's up to you. It doesn't really matter. So we're doing this on a quilt I did for my husband. He doesn't like it. Can you believe it? He doesn't like it.
It's too white for him.
We won't say the other part that he said. But anyhow, I just love this quilt, so I want to finish it. So I thought it would be beautiful for this video too. So find a spot to lay out your quilt. So we're going to do that in a minute on my floor.
Okay.
Okay, so Melony's on the floor.
Hi.
And she has the yardage.
I laid the quilt out so that it's flat but not stretched, okay?
Fold your border pieces together so you can have two thicknesses of fabric.
So you start out with the border pieces right sides together. I guess it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Okay? And then I have the border right two sides together, okay? And then we're just going to lay this down.
So another thing is do not stretch, but have your quilt laying flat. Yes, flat. And then it says take two thicknesses of your border fabric and lay them across the center of the length of the quilt. So we're not going to measure?
You can do either way. That was the next step. You can take and you can measure across the center of your quilt, or you can just lay the fabric out and then
get your borders on top of it.
Yep. Okay. We'll show you.
Okay, smooth your quilt and borders out, but do not stretch it. That's big. Don't stretch it. Okay.
Okay, so it needs to be even with the edge of one side of the quilt, and then you just smooth it out over to the other side. But you don't want to stretch, but you do want it smooth. Like that needs to be so it's laying even. And you see right here, right along the edge of the quilt.
Okay.
And then you just cut the border.
So this is for the top and bottom. Okay, two border pieces.
And so from these two border pieces, since you measured this direction, you're going to put one on up at the top, like the way I do that.
And one at the bottom.
And one at the bottom.
Okay, so we're going to do
this one because I'm closest to it. In the center again. So you put your corners together and you find where the center part is. And then you put your pin right at that point.
Okay.
Okay, you see that?
And you found your border in the center. Why didn't you find your border from the top end or the bottom end?
Because a lot of times the quilts stretch a little bit on either end. And what your problem, if you only measure this end and you put your one border on there, then that's going to be that size. And the other end could be off by up to a ½ inch sometimes.
Okay, so there's a lot of stretchage on the ends.
And it's because of the way the fabric plays when you're putting it together.
Okay, so that's why you do it from the center.
And why do you do 2 at a time?
Yes.
Is because what you want to make sure of is that when your borders are on, your quilt is square.
Okay.
And so if you have a little bit off on one end versus the other, then you can ease the fabric in most times and you can make it so it's more square.
Okay, thank you for answering.
Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm finding the center of the border piece that we just cut, just the same way.
Okay, and you're going to pin that.
And I'm going to pin this one. Now if you have a great big quilt, you want to find the center of the next spot by going right up against the pin.
Okay.
And you find the center. And you do that to the quilt. This quilt's not big enough to do that. Really, you don't really need to. But then you can ease in a smaller area.
Okay, but you then on the quilt itself, you would do the same thing.
You would do
like
the
you
same
did on
thing.
the border.
Yes. And so here we match our 2 pins. And kissy kissy.
Kissy kissy. Fabrics facing each other, like you're going to kiss somebody.
And then you pin it so those 2 pieces, you see those 2 pieces are pinned together right in the centers.
Yeah.
And then in this case I'd go to the very end and match up that corner edge so that it's right together.
Okay.
Come in just a little bit and pin. And this is probably the only place I pin a lot is putting borders on because you want them to be even. Now if it's pretty straight, then that's gonna, you can see how flat that is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not flat, sometimes it's bunched and you have to play with it.
Okay.
Okay, but so you just start pinning. What I do then is I start
pinning what, every 3 inches?
Yeah, every 3. It depends on you. As you can pin as much or as little as you want, but you match the raw edge at the top and you pin, making it even. You bring the quilt and the raw edges. Right here's the raw edges together, and you pin. And I like to pin at the seams, and that way the seams don't pull apart.
Okay.
When you're sewing. So then you, again, I kind of straighten it out. You see how it's a little bit off?
Yeah.
You bring the border up to the edge, and you pin. I didn't pin at the seam there because it was off a little bit. So here, there's the seam. I'm going to pin at that edge. Okay?
And then you do that on the
And
other
you do the
side.
same thing on the other side. Again, let's recap that. You match up the corner so your corner's even.
Okay.
Okay? And pick a little bit in. I don't like to pin on the corners because then I can't start sewing without a pin being right there. Okay? And then I straighten it out. And you see this side is going to take a little bit more pulling it up. Can you see that? Can you
Yeah.
see where you can pull that up? And so you pin.
And so this side has a little bit more wavage.
A little bit more wavage for some reason. And sometimes it's the way the blocks are put together, just the bias on the fabric. I don't really know why sometimes. Because you just measured, you found the center, it should be just exact, right? It's never exact.
And it could also be the ironing and the stretching of the fabric, right?
Yeah, it could, yeah, easily. But I always, after I pin, I try to straighten it out to see, make sure that it's pretty even. And then you take it to the sewing machine and you sew like you do all your other seams.
Now,
1/4 inch seam.
question, do you only do the top? Do you do the top and the bottom and then go to sew, or do you sew one at a time?
I sew one at a time because I stab myself with pins. So
Gotcha.
you
Okay.
can do either way because it's the same process. It's just, I'm not so coordinated, so I
Okay,
sew
so
one at a time.
we'll go sew.
Okay.
Go sew. Okay, my question is, okay, so here I have it. Do you sew this way?
Okay.
Or do you sew with this stuff at the bottom?
It depends on your quilt. If you find that the bigger, there's more ease in there, that you had to fudge it a little bit.
More?
You put that on the bottom for the feed dogs pull it through.
So,
in this case, it doesn't matter because it was pretty even.
So if you have a lot of wavage, that's what she's saying, you would quilt or sew it on here with this facing down, right?
If that's where the wavage is.
If there's a lot of wavage. If there's not a lot of wavage, it doesn't matter if you sew it
side?
Underneath or on the top. But if there's a lot of wavage... Okay. So see my border, see the wavage? I don't know if you see that right there. She's showing you that right now. What we're gonna do is my border is bigger than my quilt top. So what she told me to do is we're gonna go ahead, because the other side was even or better, flatter, we fed it, meaning the fabric going down and the border on top. But because there's more fabric of the border, we're gonna go ahead and feed this with the feed dogs down. So if your border is bigger than your quilt top,
put it on the bottom.
Put it on the bottom. Okay, so I moved the camera to the other side, and if you look on here, you can see all that extra, that puddling in fabric right here, because my border is bigger than my quilt top. So Melony was telling me that this is when you would stretch it.
Just a little bit.
Just stretch a little bit.
Between the pins.
Between the pins. So do you see that? You see that, right? You see that. It's good. So my border is bigger than my top fabric. That's why I have this on the bottom of the feed dog, so the feed dog feeds it through. If it was the other way around, my quilt top was bigger than my border, you would do it the opposite direction. I think we got it right. Did I say that right? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start sewing. And then I'm just going to stretch it a little bit. Okay, let me see. And see, on this one, you don't see any of that puddling in any way, so it's perfect. So you just let the feed dogs feed it, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't think border work was this technical. Okay, so do you see how it's not, it's pretty even, right?
Mm-hmm. I think you only had a couple of spots that weren't even on it.
Okay, so do you see this one? This one, right?
Yep, that's a little bit.
Do you see how it puddles a little bit? Hopefully you can see it. Yeah, you see how it's puddling? Here, she was telling me just to stretch a little bit. Huh?
A little bit of tension on it and it'll be fine.
So is this one.
You might notice that we keep moving the quilt so it's on top of the table, and that's to take pressure off of it while you're sewing. It just makes it easier to keep that border straight. You got it.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm. And pressing is basically that you're not stretching a whole lot, so you're not providing a whole lot of pressure on it or you're just staying in one spot to press.
Okay, so here's my border.
Your quilt center.
My
And
quilt.
here's your.
The border looks so pretty.
The border is gorgeous.
Okay, question.
What?
If I have more than two so let's say I want to add 2 more borders.
Do it exactly the same way.
My,
Okay.
so can I use the edge of
Sure.
it? So that I have a line?
but you want to make sure you're evening out. You have a mat underneath and a quilting ruler, you line it up. You want to line up the edge. There's lines on here, you want to have that on the edge of the border fabric.
So that you have your border square, 90 degree. And cut this off.
Do this one so you can do them both at the same time because that's what you like.
I'll do it your way.
It doesn't matter.
I just turned it up.
Pin half.
There's not a right way of whether you do it all at once or separate. It's individual preference.
Okay, wait. There's not an easy to do it. So, how long do your borders take you? Oh goodness.
Yeah, it helps to.
Okay, so
You just pull it up and pin. And then pin in a couple of other places. Now, I was telling Lorena, the reason I pin from the outside to the inside is the pins do take up a little space. And if you pin on the inside of the quilt, with the head of the pin on the inside of the quilt, it does take it up a little bit more. So.
okay,
The border fabric is smaller.
So because I have more fullness here, I would put this on the bottom.
Correct.
I answered correctly.
Yay! Gets an A for it.
No, because, you know, I didn't even know any of this stuff. Okay, so there's that fullness, but then if I stretch it,
It'll be fine. Because you've measured across the center and you want the quilt to be square. And that center spot is more accurate than measuring that end.
okay.
You can see that end would have been a lot bigger. I bet the other end's going to come out where you don't have a lot of fullness. More than likely. That's the way it seems to work.
Okay, so here, so I don't know if you see that, there's a lot of fullness, right? So just pick a spot.
Yeah. It's not as much as the other side, which makes no sense, I know, but it
There's a lot more fullness here. I don't know if you see that. Do you see that fullness? So the white is gonna go on the bottom of the feed dog.
correct.
Yeah. So if you see the quilt, it's up here, so there's no drag. Remember that's, and then I'm gonna start sewing. Make sure this pin is out of the way because I know that's gonna get caught. Do you see the fullness right there? Oh, do you see it right? Stretch. Take the pin out. This one's not that bad right here.
No, that's weird.
Okay, talk to me.
So if you have a problem where it looks like it's bunching a little bit more than it should, then you just adjust as you go along. Pull the next pin out and stretch it a little bit more between
So
those
let's
two pins.
say if it's too much, like right here, I could
You
adjust.
could take the pin out and you'd have a longer direction to pull. So you can adjust when you're setting down and you're sewing and you see that something's just not right. Then don't think you have to sew where your pins are. You fix it.
You can move.
You can move and adjust.
So do you see all that? And I could stretch it, like
Stretch it a little bit.
just stretch it. And this is where the feed dogs help you, right?
The feed dogs will pull a little bit, and then you're adjusting the top by stretching just a little.
So do you
Makes
see
the holes
that?
slack.
Stretch a little bit. So before I didn't even do any of this, and I would just,
Sew it on, and can you imagine why it wasn't square?
yeah. Well now, and I
I mean, the border you just did was a lot worse than this border, so that means it was bigger than this border. And the quilt top was bigger, so.
in one area than the other.
This just evens it up so that you can spread that so the top and bottom and sides are equal.
Then we did the border on, And you would do the same process, I guess, for if you want to do 3 more borders, 2 more borders.
Whatever. Every time you put a border, even if you put sashing on, you can use the same process.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm all sweaty. It's a lot of work.
Oh, but it means for a flat border, so it's worth it.
So this is how you do the borders, and from my understanding is every time you want to add another border, like on that quilt, I may add a red border and then add another blue, a thicker blue. Also too, you said something before we close, that the thicker your border, there's more of a chance of wavage.
Yes.
So maybe, so what do you mean by thicker? Like if you do a 10-inch border?
10-inch border, you have more of a chance because of the bias edge on the actual fabric. That's why if you put your borders on separately, you would have less of a chance of it being wavy. If you put it on, sew the borders together to be 10 inches wide and then put it on once, you have more of a chance of a wave.
Of the wavage. So her recommendation is that each time you add a border, go ahead and go through this process. So measure from the center like you did, and then go ahead and cut your pieces and do the top and bottom, or one side, pin it from the center, then pin the edges, and then start getting rid of that wavage. Right? Am I saying it right?
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm like I've been bad. I used to just cut it and go. So yeah, I'm learning.
She's learning, and that's the whole process of quilting.
I'm learning. We're all learning, right? Because I'm sure I'm not the only one that just cuts your fabric and zooms on and sews it all in, and it should be fine. And apparently it doesn't work that way.
Sometimes not.
It doesn't work that way. So I really thank you for watching, and I know you're going to love this video. See you next time, okay? Bye.
Bye.
Bye.